let's turn to a little bit to something I know you've been on the beat on Twitter, and
on the beat.
I don't know.
It's hard to avoid this beat.
What?
It's hard to avoid this
it's
beat.
annoying, and I don't want to spend too much time on it because I think it's actually like more of, to be honest with you, like a Twitter phenomena than it is, I think, one that is going to bear out at the polls. But who knows? And this is the area in which we live, and podcast technology has not reached. I think YouTube does in many respects, but podcasts have not reached, I think, sort of like the way that, let's say, radio does, and even YouTube's to some extent has not attained the reach that radio does. There's a couple of pieces being written about, like, the right-wing talk radio still completely underestimated in terms of how much it has driven us to this area and driven us to this era and drives this era in many respects on the right. But let's talk about Bree's podcast and what is it called again? I'm sorry.
Faith.
I can't remember what the name of it is.
Bad Faith.
Bad Faith. It's Bree and Virgil Texas's show. And so you set this up because I haven't seen this clip yet.
So they, it's a newer show, and obviously they're friends of ours and allies and comrades in many different ways. And they interviewed Noam Chomsky and gave him a tough time about this vote blue no matter who, whatever you want to, however you want to describe it, essentially voting for Biden in this election. It's not like Chomsky hasn't been challenged on this ad nauseum in the last 6 months, but I think what sticks out is just the timing of it, that we are 21 days away from the election and we're having conversations over how it really could come down to, for all we know, based on 2016, could come down to certain districts across the country, and it could be very tight. And so the pushback, while it got
let's
a lot
play
of
the clip. I think we have like a 35-second clip of it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, let's see it.
What are the long-term consequences of everybody on the broad left, Democrats, liberals, everyone, saying that under any circumstances, we will vote for a Democratic candidate as long as they are incrementally better than the Republican candidate? Does that way of thinking contribute to the rightward shift of the Democratic Party over years? And what mechanism will ever stop that shift if we're not willing to ever, under any circumstances, leverage our votes?
What you're saying, if you think it through, is we should help Trump win because maybe in the long run, that'll affect the Democratic Party. That's a terrible choice. Helping Trump win, as you're proposing, would mean 4 more years of destruction of the environment, getting possibly to tipping points, which would be irreversible, certainly making any effort to deal with it very difficult. It would mean stacking the judiciary with young, ultra-right lawyers, top to bottom, so that nothing would be possibly done for a generation. And I can go on and on. I don't think that's a wise choice, just on the hope that maybe sometime in the long term, the Democratic Party will pay attention to the fact that you're part of the 50% of non-voters.
I take the multi-generational threat very seriously. As a Black American whose family members have been living as a third tier in American society. My mother was born into an America that didn't recognize her basic human rights. In 1960, she's a relatively young woman. And so what concerns me is the way in which the vote blue no matter who mindset basically privileges more recent concerns that are equally grave as more long-standing concerns that are built in the status quo, and says we have to vote for X candidate to prevent X ill from happening. At the same time, those who have suffered under the status quo never seem to get an opportunity to have their issues heard.
I mean, do you want to start with this?
Well, I have some, there's a response to the long-term versus short-term. There's nothing more long-term and short-term than the climate debate. And on that, I'm so glad that Professor Chomsky started with that issue, because that to me is something that I don't care if Joe Biden is a neoliberal who says he's for fracking. He has a climate plan in which was written by the Sunrise Group and a coalition of climate activists. But that's a completely, I think my big question is, what do we gain from this argument right now? What do we gain by withholding our votes? If someone can actually come up with an answer, and I've posed this question over and over, what do you materially gain? I'm asking you Marxists who believe you're Marxists, what do you materially gain from supporting or not supporting anyone and staying out?
This has exactly been my argument for years.
I don't think that's a Marxist analysis. No.
I mean, yeah, present.
Why is it not a Marxist analysis? I mean,
because it's purely ideological. It's like everyone. It's often based on this pendulum theory of elections that they swing back and forth if we just send the message to the right people, including voters in the party. Like it's clearly not how it works, and that's not how any Marxist, I think, properly understanding any of that body of work would think it should work.
You mean? I'm sorry. Just to clarify, you mean that by not
that
voting,
Bree's argument is not.
Got it. I thought you meant my argument was not Marxist.
Right. And this is the problem: is that it is the complaint that she is arguing is accurate. The opportunity that she's saying, like, when do our issues get heard? Well, I mean, the primary for one, and unfortunately, not enough work was done or has been done up to the point that the primary takes place to build enough of a mass to actually elect Joe Biden. Now, I know the DNC exists, and, without even litigating, I can stipulate that they have an undue ability to influence elections. Okay. They have an undue ability to influence elections. What are you going to do to defeat that? How does you not voting get to that point? There is it's black box, magic black box. Do you want an example of that not happening? Of the theory that if I withhold my vote, then we get better outcomes? Here's an example, 2016.
Well, they're going to counter and say, and it's right. Two things can be right at the same time. So that was Hillary Clinton's fault. She did not campaign to working people, and as a result, working people making under $50,000 did not turn out and vote. They didn't invest in key states. So that's their argument, and that's the argument they're making now. Well, Joe Biden needs to earn my vote.
Well, wait a second. Even if I stipulate that Hillary Clinton screwed up, I mean, I think there's a myriad of reasons, but let me stipulate that. Where's the evidence that her losing in that way had the outcome that it's supposedly going to bring, which is, where is the candidate that is better than Hillary Clinton now? Where's the upgrade? Because she lost. I mean, first of all, this is not what they were saying beforehand was, I'm going to withhold my vote. And if she loses, we're going to get a better candidate. That was the argument. That was the theory.
Or would teach them a lesson. Bernie Sanders was that. That was the lesson.
They don't learn.
That was it.
People don't learn. I can also make the argument that people don't learn because it was attempted in 2016 and it failed. If the agenda was to get a better candidate this time around, I don't think Joe Biden's a better candidate than Hillary Clinton. I think on many things, like just on sheer policy, probably worse than she is. I mean, maybe his climate change, his climate proposal is better, but that was 4 years ago. There's 4 years. We have 4 years less to deal with that. But his Medicare proposal's worse. His healthcare proposals are worse.
Barely mentions charter schools, and don't forget that was a charter school administration, and Hillary Clinton was not.
Hillary Clinton was not. I mean, and we can argue as to which one is to the right or left, but it's clearly there's not a huge upgrade here.
Right.
And so there is no theory of change there. And to the extent that you could articulate one, it is only things have to get so bad. There has to be so much immiseration that we must usher in till we get real change. So that's what we need to do. And otherwise it's just sort of like a personal morality question.
The thing that really frustrates me about this is So there's this argument right now about, well, Trump's not a fascist. I don't know if you've seen this one. So you make these arguments, and the response is, because we're fighting fascism. We didn't know how bad Trump was going to be. We had an idea. Anybody who studied Trump or interviewed Wayne Barrett, read any of his books, had a sense of who he was. But for the most part, when folks said, I'm voting green, they didn't understand what that whole game was. When folks said, well, if Trump wins, well, at least like the Clinton dynasty will be over and neoliberalism will be dead. That didn't happen. No. And Trump isn't that bad. Clearly didn't happen. Now we know what happens. So why are we still making this argument? And the only thing it comes down to me, is you don't necessarily understand how primaries work. And I don't know if everybody understands that there were some strategies that just may not have been the best strategies for the Bernie campaign, and he was out-strategized. And yes, he was running against MSNBC. Yes, he was running against the DNC. But they knew that because they went through it in 2016.
It's not like who could have imagined that they would have done that, right? I mean, none of this is like saying I would have won the marathon, but there was a hill there. Well, you knew there was a hill there when you started the race.
So I think some of it's personal. I think some of it is actually just personal, and that's dangerous. I keep saying in the face of fascism, and I can't believe how many leftists are saying Trump's not a fascist, or that Biden is too.
Listen, Trump doesn't need to be a fascist. I mean, I don't, people, the definition of fascism is you can get 5 different definitions from 5 different people that you talk to, but there is no doubt that Trump is worse for the least politically represented in this country. I mean, that is the fact. And if only because it's also like, it is Mitch McConnell you're empowering. I mean, Trump gives you a lot of like sort of the fascistic, if you will, policies. But meanwhile, McConnell is destroying like the average worker, destroying. And again, part of it is like there is just a complete absence of understanding of the role of the courts in our society. Right. And you can say they're bad, but that doesn't make them go away. Right. You can say it's unfair and we should have structural change and we shouldn't have courts, we shouldn't have this, but they exist. They exist today. They're going to exist in 10 years. They're going to exist in 20 years. They're going to exist in 30 years, and they're going to exist in 40 and 50 years. I wouldn't, maybe in 51 years, there won't be any. But for the next, 20 to 30 or 40 years, we're definitely going to have courts, and they're going to implicate, every element of our society. And it is not enough to say, I want these things to go away. It is not enough to say, I want the neoliberals to go away, or I'm not going to participate in their game. That's not an expression of change. That doesn't, not only does it not bring material benefit in the short run, even if it's less material benefit than you would want, there's no plan there. There's no 1-year plan. There's no 2-year plan or 5-year plan or 10-year plan. There's just some like, maybe this will happen sometime out there.
I mean, courts have been around for centuries longer than what we understand to be the age of capitalism. So they're probably not going to be
without a doubt. Without a doubt. And so I don't know.
So I mean, but the other thing, like attached to this is actually the plan for Democrats. So if you think that the Democratic Party is sick of progressives and doesn't want that, this is how you do what they want. This is also how you divide the left. 3 weeks before the election, we're having this conversation rather than how we're going to push the Biden administration on the Green New Deal, which I don't think he's going to be able to avoid. How are we going to push the Biden administration on Medicare for all, which is a huge point of leverage we have right now in the midst of a pandemic. But instead, we are going through 2016 debates over whether or not Biden is nice enough to us. This is politics.
I couldn't agree more. Like right now, there was a piece that I saw. Gosh, where the heck is it? There's a piece on the attempts to get Politico had a piece, and
great publication.
It references only. There's a whole different. Yes, that's it. Like, this is what we should be focusing on, right? Is like, there's a fight going on.
Yeah.
That basically is, they call them Warren proteges. Some of them are. There's obviously people out there who plant the story, want to make it, they're politicking. Like, this is the thing. They're doing work that is building political power in the structures that we have at this time. It's not a mutually exclusive project, but it's just like the ship, the train is leaving the station. You can't do this 6 to 8 months from now. You want to get your people in on day one. You want to get them in on day one because the biggest push for an agenda is going to happen in these first 2 years if they take the Senate and they take the House and they take the presidency. These 2 years are going to be defining as to what the Biden administration is going to be. I can tell you right now, it is going to be suboptimal from the perspective of the left. But the question is, how less suboptimal can we make it? How much can we make it address? Like, the difference in having, like, I don't know, Katie Porter in the administration, or people from Sherrod Brown's banking committee working in the administration on issues of banking regulation, aides to Maxine Waters, getting in to help develop climate change policy. Whomever it is, the point is that, like, this is where we should be engaged. But basically saying, like, hey, we're not involved in this election is basically like saying, like, oh, okay. Well, in that case, guess what? You don't have a seat at the table.
Exactly.
Bye.
That's right.
See you later.
And there's real leverage. I mean, this was a mistake in 2006. Granted, you were dealing with the Clintons, which that also I think we should make very clear. Dealing with the Clintons, who did not give you room at the table, did not give you air, spit on you in your face, took out opposition files on you, had trolls go out there and attack you. You think, no, this was very real. Targeted you on commissions and other folks. I mean, Jim Zogby, I can't even tell you the amount of hate mail he got because he had a vote in something. That's how they dealt with us. There was no, we had to have a seat at the table and they wouldn't give it to us. They wouldn't even give us the space. This time around, I mean, you've said it before, Sam, like, because Biden doesn't have this 30-year machine. He doesn't have a machine. He doesn't have a legacy of people who have been barnacles on the good ship right. Biden for years, because he's just been basically the same guy the entire time. There's room. It's like that. It's the scene around the bed while the king is dying of a consumption, where everybody's like, I'm going to get in there first and I'm going to, get the throne, and you got to get in the game. And otherwise you're just going to sit this one out and watch from the side.
What frustrates me, and I like Brie a lot, but the way these conversations always happen is they use like this disenfranchised voter as a sort of puppet, because they don't want to own the actual strategy themselves. They say, what would you say to this voter who has all these reasons not to like the Democratic Party? And then, like, Chomsky isn't actually talking to them, so he can't actually reason with them. He can't actually work his arguments on them. And like, either have them on bad faith, have those types of voters on bad faith, so they can talk to somebody like Noam Chomsky themselves, if it's their concerns and not yours, or like, I guess, move on from this discussion, because I frankly don't think it's that fruitful. We've been having it for like half a decade since I've been doing this professionally, and I haven't heard a single.
Yes, no, I agree with that totally.
Agreed. But I think that the issue with it is that the timing of it was particularly frustrating.
Yeah,
the timing of it and how it became like a trending item. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't see an argument as to how it's helpful. That's the thing. I just don't.